Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited. This is Rabbi Drew Kaplan. I'm very excited to have a conversation with the man behind the artwork in the hallways of our building in the administrative wing. This is Mordechai Rosenstein. So Mordechai, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, believe me. I'm looking forward to it.
This is great. This is great. So for some of you who may be in the hallways in the administrative wing, you might be wondering what is behind this artwork? What's the story? So I'm very excited, very pleased. Mordechai lives in Pennsylvania, and Mordechai, you're 86, right?
Yes.
86 years old. So Mordechai here is the contemporary of many of you here in the building. What was your first piece? So 1979, which we have a piece from 1979 and one from 1980. So early career. And that was around the time you started, right?
October and November of '79, our first show was we went to the United Synagogue Convention at the Concord Hotel, but we had to go up to New York and submit. I had 3 designs. We had to submit them, and we got approval that we could have a booth. So they set us up, in between some booths, like in the middle. I don't know if you knew the Concord. They could set up some kind of temporary booths down the middle of the hall. The booths were on each side. These spaces, they created booths. But how it really started, this is, I was doing lettering in New York. I was doing ketubot, actually, before I knew anyone else was. I was doing ketubot. Well, after art school, I went to the Army, and I came back, and I went right up to New York to work as a textile designer. And there were a lot of art students, buddies from art school in New York. That's where we went for work.
When were you in the Army?
1955 to 57.
Okay.
Right in between, thank God, Korea and Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Right in between. Whoa. Yeah. So, and I did artwork there. I was in what they call training aids.
Oh, yeah.
They have these training aids, that they use illustrations of weapons and things. So I kept those in good shape. Anyway, I went right up to New York, and I don't know why I knew. Well, since David Morse, I knew about ketubot, and once in a while I would do it for a friend who was getting married, and they enjoyed it. They appreciated it. So let's see. I want to get it all kind of right. Well, actually, my ketubah was the first one that I did in 1962. 1962. I remember going with my bride to the rabbi in Long Island. I forget his name, wonderful man, an Orthodox rabbi. And I said, "Can I do my own ketubah?" He said, "Certainly." Because it's, he gave me permission to do it. Because, it's not anyone can write one. God is not mentioned. It's a contract.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. So anyway, I did my own ketubah. Then I started to do them for friends. This was during the 60s. And I worked in a textile firm until 67, when I went back to Philadelphia, because as an art student, I had worked in my uncle's frame shop in the summers. He had a beautiful big frame shop. So I did everything. I helped everybody. So I came back in 67, and I worked for 9 years. I didn't touch a brush or a canvas. I was the nephew, so I was the foreman. But I knew all these men from, previous years. I knew all of them. They were all, veterans who got a job and you stuck with it from the Second World War. So it was the same guys, the same crew. But then my uncle passed away, and his son-in-law and daughter, they retired and sold the business, but not as a business. They just sold it off. So I was unemployed. So I opened a frame shop. That's what I knew.
Yeah.
And I was like in 76 or 77. I opened the frame shop, and my wife, she kind of ran it, and I converted a bedroom upstairs into a frame shop because we rented a house from my father in Philly. and it had a store. It was over a store, which I used as a frame shop.
Yeah.
And we weren't making much of a living. I was doing nice work, but night and day. And, you know, my wife, when we got married, she was secretary to the editor of 17 magazine.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
she had an office on Park Avenue across from the Waldorf, and I was the lover from the Schmata district, 7th Avenue. You know, I worked at Broadway and 40th.
Yeah.
Well, my uncle asked me would I come back. I had 9 years in with this firm. We already had a baby. And my uncle said, would you come back and be the foreman? And his son had passed away. He was a hemophiliac.
Wow.
So I said, Maddie said, let's go. And I always point out when I tell this story that, you know, Jacob asked his wives, shall we go back? You know, and they said, sure, there's nothing here in your father's house for us. But he did ask his wives. I always like to point that out, you know. I asked her, shall we go back to New York? Shall I stick it out to Philly? Or shall I stick it out here? She said, let's go back. Let's go. And so after 9 years with a little baby, back to Philly. And I worked 9 years. I wasn't Shomer Shabbos at the time until much later when I ran into Chabad with my well, I had been to a Hebrew day school, a Hebrew Academy. I was a graduate, first class, but that wasn't Shomer Shabbos. And well, our little girl, we wanted to send her to a nursery and a day school, and it was run by Chabad at the time. And one rabbi grabbed me and said, you have tefillin? And I did have tefillin for my bar mitzvah. And believe it or not, they were Chabad tefillin.
Oh, really?
So I don't know how. I got them from an uncle of mine, you know, who was not a religious man at all. So maybe just to know what he was buying. But when I brought them in, he said, these are Chabad tefillin. You could tell by the knot how it was tied. So let's see, where am I? Oh, so we opened the frame shop, and then we weren't making a living really. Now, someone in the neighborhood knew I was doing. I put up some Hebrew calligraphy in the store. I also had what's his name that did a conservative, did a reform, Leonard Baskin. He did a Haggadah, very beautiful. I had Leonard Baskin's. It was kind of Jewish art in a way I had up there. So I was doing some Hebrew calligraphy, just put it up, maybe a Mizrach. There was a dean at Temple University that was involved in Russian Jewry. So they wanted to honor him. And someone in the neighborhood, I forget her name, figured, could you make a piece, you know, with the word tzedek, tzedek, tirdov, justice shalt thou pursue. So I said, yes, I'll try it. Being an insecure, you know, in my Hebrew calligraphy work, I made one on a Saturday night. You know, I had my shop was, I was doing the work that I'd come in. Oh no, I still had the shop. So I did the piece at night, Shabbos, Motzi Shabbos. And then I said, you know, being an insecure artist, I made a second piece. The second piece, I remember doing the first stroke. I remember doing the whole piece. I remember when it was finished. I remember going upstairs in the morning and Maddie said, how was it? I said, I think I got it. I heard the angels sing. I like to say that. When I finished this piece, I walked upstairs. Now, they came in to pick the piece they wanted. They took the other one, which I don't even remember what it looked like. This is the weird stuff. I don't remember what it looked like. But this one, I remember when I did it. I remember the feeling when I went up, when it was finished. I get the chills now thinking about it. This is laying in a drawer. So Maddie gets a call. We're not doing really well. So she gets a call. Someone said there's a job at our School of Performing Arts and Development. Who would you recommend? That was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in 1979. She said, I want that job. She said, out of here, we're closing this shop. You'll find work. I want that job. She interviewed and started work Wednesday morning.
Wow.
So I closed the place and I started to just do the work I had that came in. Someone calls, she wants to pick up her work. I said, sure, you can pick it, just knock on the door and I'll let you in. She doesn't come, but her husband. This is the nace. This is the linchpin. This is it. Omek Shlomo Zalman. Omek, he knocks. Now it's the whole story what he was doing. His father was first Volkswagen dealer, but he left because his father had a partner. He said, I'd never inherit the business. So he left it after many years. And he was wholesaling automobiles on the street. That's a whole other explanation. You don't have an office. His car is his office. So he stops in and he picks up the work and he starts to look around and he see Leonard Baskin. He belonged to a synagogue because his kids were in Hebrew school. And he looked around at the work and we started talking and he looks around and I said, I have a piece I did. If I had money, I could reproduce it. And I opened a drawer. There it is. Been laying there for a year or two. And he said, well, all right. He liked what he saw. He liked the idea. He had nothing to do with art, but he liked what he saw.
Huh.
He said, so he pays me for his work and he goes home. Well, you got another hour. I'll be done soon, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
I'm not rushing you. I'm not rushing you.
Okay. Yeah. So he pays me for his work and he leaves. 2 days later, there's a knock on the door and he's standing there with a handful of money like this. It turned out he had borrowed it from his father. He said, let's go print this thing. I like it.
Oh, wow.
So we went down to this printer. I called an artist friend, where do you get your work printed? And he told me that David Stuber. We went down and gave them the design. Said, we want 100 prints. And he said, okay. 2 weeks later, he calls. And meanwhile, I'm finishing this work that I have. And Saul comes and he looks in his closet. He said, what's there? I said, work that I've done. I'm waiting for people to come in and get it. He said, give me the phone and give me the orders. Hello, I'm bringing your order over. I have a check ready. And in 2 days, I had all the money, of all this work that would have taken months to get rid of. So then we go down and get the piece and he brings it back, the prints. And he's not sure how to sell artwork. Well, if you're a salesman, you later on realized you could sell watches, shoes, pictures. If you're a salesman and like the product, you can sell it. And I could never be a salesman. 20 years I stood in the booth with him at the shows and still couldn't close. Didn't know what he's doing. So we go to, so I framed one up. And I said, Bank Pauline just opened in Philly, 1979. I said, I'm going to frame one up. Maybe they'll buy them and give them out to their accounts. Well, it was pretty big. It was 22 by 30, the paper. So he goes down there with a framed one, and it turned out Svi became a buddy. As the president of the bank said, well, we're a commercial bank, but I'd like one for the boardroom. It said Tzedek. It had Tzedek in black and white, the written law, and then it had Tzedek in multicolor, the interpretation of the law. That was the whole idea. Tzedek. So instead of taking the check and cashing it and getting a bottle of wine and coming home, he went over to Bank Leumi on Walnut Street. Yeah. And they bought one for the boardroom.
Oh, wow.
Now it says Tzedek, and Philadelphia is known for its lawyers.
Oh, really?
So he starts to hit lawyers. Tzedek, he's not selling light bulbs or hand towels. I'd like to see Mr. Perlman, if I might. That piece of artwork. Sold 3 more. Sold 5 pieces the first day.
Wow.
Came home with checks and said, I think there's a business here. Make some more designs.
That's great.
So I made 2 more, actually big ones. They're not shown, but they're not even online. One said, Chitzatu ha'charlo tam le'itzim, beat their swords into plowshares. And the third one was Yesh Tikva li'achritech. Those 3, but we don't show them anymore. They're too large. They framed up to 24 by 36 or 20. They were too large. We found out, people would buy a smaller picture. So we go up and we get approved and we go to the first show and we take up all the prints in boxes with 3 frame samples. And we did a 1979, the Rabbinical Assembly. We did a land office business. We did thousands. Unbelievable. Selling them for $65 a piece, unframed. they had never seen a tzaddik or an olive this big and red or green or blue. It just
Wow.
wasn't around. Believe me, it wasn't around. I remember a whole delegation came from California. They wanted to buy as a group. Now Schleimer could handle this
Wow.
because, you know, he had grown up in the automobile business. So he had
Yeah.
his little pad in his hip palm. Oh, you want to buy how many? This and that. I'll give you a break here and there. It was amazing, amazing. I remember that a whole group came from California.
Wow.
So, and then we were on our way. He said, well, what do we do now? We're not going to open a store. It was so unfamiliar to people. We said, he asked someone at the JCC in Ohio if we could come out and show. And then there was another convention in California where we took the few prints that we had in a portfolio. Now, we didn't rent a booth, but we couldn't afford it. And we flew out to California. He stayed with his cousin. She had like a studio apartment out there. And I was scheduled to sleep at Chabad in the office. I ended up in the office on the couch because their Chabad house had burned down the previous year. So they were in an office building. So I slept, but they didn't pick me up the first night. We flew from Newark to LA. There used to be flights from Newark, New Jersey. And I was wearing a black leather coat, a black hat, sunglasses. I mean, in Newark in midnight, with sunglasses. Well, they came to the airport. They were looking for a chassid. You know, there's a guy in a black leather coat with sunglasses. So no one came for me. But the next day I called Rabbi Shenter. I said, they looked for you. They couldn't find you. Well, they were looking for a chassid. So the next day I spent in the office there, slept on the couch. Eventually they did build a new Chabad house. And that was an interesting story too. But so what we would walk around, Shlomo would walk around and stop by a booth or something, stop people and open the portfolio. You want to buy a print? You know, show them a couple prints that we had. They never threw us out. I'm sure they knew what we were doing, going around. You want to buy a print? And then we started to get shows. We started to do shows in synagogues because some of the rabbis said, well, bring this, you have a show, bring it to my synagogue. So we started traveling, and we've had shows in Hong Kong and Zurich, in London, and Anchorage, Alaska, but Lincoln, Nebraska too. We went out there twice, about 30 years apart. Yeah. So, and that's what we did. We started making these, I would do shows. But then eventually we got into when Barry joined, you know Barry Megan? When he joined the group about 15 years ago, he said, let's do an art show while we're there, a class in calligraphy. And we started that, and that became very successful. And then they started what they call a Pinot and Paint, which a lot of women would go to. Well, we started a Pinot and Paint night, men and women, whoever wanted to come, and they were a lot of fun, very successful.
Oh, wow.
So that's how, there we are, and trying to think if we're in, I think we're in the Skirball collection. I don't think we went to, we were so uncool. We went to the Skirball, no, not the Skirball's in Chicago, I'm sorry, the one in UCLA. And
there's a Skirball museum out in LA.
But this was another one. It wasn't the maybe it was a Skirball. It was at UCLA, at USC at the time. Then they had their own building there.
Yeah.
But we just knocked on a Monday when they were closed. They let us in and we said, we have prints you might be interested in buying for your collection. And he did buy 3 of them. So they're in that collection,
That's great.
Otherwise, we were just out on the road, hustling, selling. Well, Barry was how things changed. Schleim and I would fly into Minneapolis on Friday. We'd do a Friday or Saturday night show, fly out on Sunday. Barry said, wait a minute, there's another shul about 20 miles away, or maybe even across the street that would never come to this one. Let's do a show there. So now we would go to California for a month and, do maybe, 4 or 5 synagogues, a weekend at each synagogue up and down the coast. From Sacramento all the way down to San Diego over the years. So,
So you mentioned when you started in the 70s into this, there really wasn't much out there as far as Jewish art, or maybe more specifically like Hebrew calligraphy. Art,
Hebrew calligraphy, yeah, it
yeah,
wasn't
Hebrew
out
calligraphy.
there. Yeah, Leonard Baskin had done some, a Haggadah for the Reform movement, but and there was some Hebrew in it. But it was an adjunct to the picture. Like if it was, let's see, who would it be if he did the Haggadah? Well, the four sons maybe just
Hmm.
would put the four sons. The Hebrew, the Hebrew was not a major part of it. But I really think that I kind of started that, David
Oh yeah.
Moss and I. But really, the big Hebrew letters in color. It was
Huh.
amazing. People, that first show, we did amazing business.
Oh
People had
wow.
never seen it. They all wanted to take one home. I say I wore out the carpet at the Concord, going back and forth to get the prints and tube them up.
That's
We
great.
brought them flat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that was a career. Now it's kind of we don't travel anymore. The synagogues are not happening, but eventually they might. Yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
if I'm well enough, I'll be on the road again. Who
Yeah.
knows?
And
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 I go by train. I gave up flying before 9/11. I
oh
guess I was
wow.
claustrophobic. I couldn't take it. I didn't
Yeah.
enjoy it. Didn't
Hmm.
like it. And I got to a point, I guess I felt strong enough. I said, I'll go by train. And actually, a lot of times it costs a lot more. Like LA is 3 days. Barry, when I'm leaving LA, like we would sleep near the airport, and Barry would get up at 5 a.m. and get the flight, and I would get the bus that goes to the,
Train
what do you call
station. The
it?
Union Station in LA.
Yeah, it would take me. Yeah, it would take me to no to the airport. At the
Oh.
airport, there was a bus going to Union Station. That's
Oh.
right. And I would get there, and they would load up about 4 p.m. Barry would call from Philly.
Mhm.
Are you on the train yet? Yeah. But I
That's good.
enjoyed it. I saw a lot of the country. I mean, I enjoyed that trip.
That's great.
Back and forth. I never tired of it. Yeah.
Wow. And when did Hebrew calligraphy in the U.S. really get more people? Was it in the 80s, 90s? When
I think I think it started even in the early '80s. There was a young lady from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I forget her name. That would show up at the Concord Hotel, starting to do calligraphy and ketubot.
Mm.
That was the entry, ketubot. And then remember
God.
we met a woman. Then there was the Pomegranate Guild
Oh yeah.
of women artists who worked in fabric and everything. And I remember in one city, maybe it was Minneapolis, a woman came, she had done the Ten Commandments or lettering, on the fabric. That was starting to happen, that the letters were becoming, important,
Huh.
becoming a vehicle for artwork.
Oh wow.
So now, like I said, with the Ketubah, it really blew it open. That
Hmm.
really did. And now, chuppahs and even, arcs. And then there's, synagogues that have calligraphy on the walls and the designs. So
Hmm.
letters have become important. Uh, Not in too much stained glass. I don't see it too much in stained glass, except for my windows in West Bloomfield, Michigan, at
Yeah.
Shir Shalom. Uh,
Yeah.
I think it's Shir Shalom, West Bloomfield, Michigan. Now, a lot of times as an artist, you have to submit to a committee. That's always dangerous. I remember we laughed one time. The head of the committee showed up and he was all in beige. We don't have a chance. I mean, we do color, you know. Uh, but
Yeah.
I remember the windows, they're large. They're 5 feet wide by 18 feet tall, six of them. It
Hmm.
shows, I think it's on, you could find it on our website, the
Oh,
stained
yeah.
glass windows. Um, the committee was the rabbi. He liked them, said, do it. Because he had built the synagogue. He was, his own kind of creation and made his own congregation. Uh, Daniel, not Daniel, but Daniel uh, in West Bloomfield, Michigan. I remember when we stopped back to see the windows several years later with Barry, the rabbi, Daniel, had already given his office to the assistant rabbi and had a smaller place. But I have to tell you, he took us, when we did the window, he took us out for lunch to a biker bar and everybody knew his name. Honest to God, that was no fooling. Hey, Rabbi, it was a biker bar. I think it
That's
was
great.
in Michigan, in Bloomfield. Yeah, Rabbi Daniel. It's a story on the road. I mean, so much. You know, I always have a story. You know, my granddaughter's in New York now at the Fashion Institute, and she's
Right.
asking about artists. Well, I was in the '50s hanging out in New York when I was still in art school, and I knew like Franz Klein. I studied with him. The guy is world famous.
Wait,
You know,
quick,
I,
before we move on to him, I think I found, is it this? Is it these windows?
no, no, those are for a home right near here. It's the five
Oh,
books. Uh, that's the five books in their chapel.
okay. All right.
But the others are more dramatic. They're very large. These are about 3 feet square.
Oh, okay.
They should be on under that.
You can be on
The
the
other.
synagogue's website.
Oh yeah, it's on the same website. Yeah, look them up. Maybe I don't know how it's. Well, if you had those stained glass, they should have been together, I guess. Boy,
Uh,
am I getting a debriefing? I could talk all day.
it's great. I'm trying to
40
think,
years on the road. Yeah, they have the holidays.
is it
You
any of
know.
these?
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
well, I don't know if these are you. Is it? It's not this, is it? No.
no, no, these are huge. These are 18 feet tall,
All
5 feet wide.
right. Okay. I'll
But
have to-
maybe on our website, I would suspect.
Oh, really? Okay.
So that's what. Now I say you walk into a bookstore. Where are the books?
Right.
Again, it's all artwork and beautiful and people. You know, there's some. I've seen some great work now. I'm envious, honest to God. You know, and that's the way it is. You know,
Mm,
the old lions, and then here come the young tigers, and that's the
mm,
way it should be. So it's not anything unusual anymore that people would even have something up in their home, a big piece of calligraphy. I mean,
have you? How has it been for you as an artist in the Hebrew calligraphy field to see it develop, especially in the last few decades, versus when you
I
started?
think it's fantastic. I
Yeah.
really do. I say there's work that I envy. I mean, they're doing beautiful work, you know, very creative, and so many people. And that's the way it is. That's the way it should be. But
Yeah.
when we went out there, we were out there alone. I really have to admit, and people were said, "Wow, you know, look, it's colorful. I think I could put one up in my home." Oh, I got to tell you, once at the Concord at a big convention, there's a
Yeah.
gentleman. They were from Canada, and they owned Spotless Laundries. I don't know if they're from New York. Anyway, they were a wealthy couple, and he was interested in an original, a piece that we had some originals there, and his
Yeah.
wife came over and said, "You don't have to advertise it, you know, your Jewishness." So we lost that sale.
Oh no.
I'll never forget that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to advertise it. But,
Yeah.
you know, I
So,
have lawyer friends who have it. Tzedek, Judge Ginsburg had it. She had
mm,
Tzedek Tzidov, our
oh,
design.
wow. That's
She
great.
had some
That's
other Hebrew
amazing.
calligraphy. Yeah, so um,
So you had started to say before I was trying to show the pictures of the windows that your influence, you were talking about the artistic influence in your own artistic work.
maybe, well, no, maybe our success had others say, "Hey, I can do that also." There's a guy, David Cohen in Baltimore. That's a fantastic sofa. Plus, he does designs with the calligraphy. I just like to say, maybe we, you know, uh, got it off the ground. And David Moss, you know, with the Ketubot.
Uh-huh.
And we've done so many, 40 years of synagogues in the U.S. Is a synagogue I don't think we haven't missed, and maybe a few, but like we got a Lincoln, Nebraska,
Yeah.
and Great Falls, Montana. I did a show, not at a synagogue, but there was a meeting of all the Jews in Montana once a year. Honest to God, it
Oh,
was
really?
in Great Falls, yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
someone came out from Washington to speak. I forget from what, maybe from one of those organizations. I forget what it was. And then I did a show of the Hebrew calligraphy, sold some things. Yeah.
Mhm.
So no place was too small for us.
That's great. So I am curious about the influence on, because I know you said you had been involved artistically one way or another before, like for years since you were a kid. But how did you had met? Began to mention a guy by the name of Franz who had an artistic influence on you. So I'm curious to hear from you how was he influential in your art, and then also what has been the trajectory of your own style, because you were talking about the pieces that we have here at Cedar Village from 1979 to 1985, that your styles have changed throughout the decades. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
how did he influence you? How has your style been, and how has it changed?
Well, in high school, I started to copy a Megillah. I just
Oh, yeah?
was, yeah. With
Wow.
so, I knew I wanted to do Hebrew. I really loved the letters. I wanted to do the Hebrew. So I still have it. I got about one chapter done of the Megillah in high school, and then I went to a professional art school, where again, one of the instructors in sophomore year, she wasn't Jewish, Mrs. Kohler, somehow knew I didn't wear a kippah, I didn't have a beard. I guess she looked at my record, I don't know. She said, I would like you to do a piece using Hebrew letters.
Oh, yeah.
I guess she saw, hey, you're doing artist, and maybe you could do something with the Hebrew letters.
Mm-hmm.
And I did Shaddai, I remember, out of like stone dust. There was a matzeva maker, the school was in Center City. A couple blocks away, I said, can I gather up the dust and the chips? And I did the Shaddai, and it disappeared from the exhibit. I never got it back.
Mm. Oh, wow.
But she saw, put these things together, this art and this Hebrew calligraphy, really. And it took me many more years before then I started to do ketubot. But I guess what really started it was when we went on the road with the three pieces.
Mm-hmm.
That was the start. But I've been doing Hebrew calligraphy, but it was new. It was really new. 1979, Rabbinical Assembly. And,
Yeah.
they were, yeah.
How has it
I don't know if I'm answering it right.
Yeah, how has it changed? How have you changed in your own art styles, and what's fueled that change, that progression, and where are you now with your styles, with your style?
I'm going to show you something
Yeah.
that no one has ever seen, and you just happened while we're locked up in the house. Sit right there, but you got to raise your right hand on this one.
Okay.
Can you see this?
Wow. Is it? Are you going to bring it in, or that's the final piece? Are you going to be?
Can you see this?
Is that the final piece?
That's it. Tikkun Olam.
Wow.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
In these last couple of weeks, from all the way through everything. Now, no one has seen these. Nobody.
Sneak peek.
Franz Klein worked in black and white.
Oh,
You get back to your roots.
Oh, wow.
Again, it's, attention to the areas. They have to be just as interesting. They're just as important to the composition.
Wow.
But that's where I'm at. It's kind of crazy, you should ask. I'm back to Franz Klein, black and white.
Coming back to your origins.
It's kind of crazy. Well, at 86, you start to worry about, you can only look back.
Yeah.
But it's funny that this is in the last few weeks.
Oh, yeah? Oh, wow.
There it is. I got some more canvases, and I get real satisfaction out of it. And it's still the letters, still the letter forms. Can you read it? Tikkun Olam?
Yeah,
maybe a little
right
hard.
now on the screen I can see the tikkun, just not the olam. Yeah,
Ayin, Vav, Lamed, and Sophie.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's some
I've opened up.
going on.
Like I just got a load of canvases from Blick, United Supply, but no
Yeah.
one has seen these. Honest to God, no one has seen these, Rabbi.
Wow.
But you get to a point too at 86. I like them. That's what I want to do. That's where
Yeah,
I'm at
that's
because there's no market. It's not that. It's just that that's what I'm doing now.
yeah,
I got It's crazy. We should just talk, and that's my direction. I don't know
yeah.
what's going to happen. I could give it up in a month. I don't know, but that's where I am at the moment.
That's really nifty.
Maybe I'll start to add color. I don't know, because he started in the end to add color.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a famous painting called Torches Purple. He started to add some purple. That was an art supply store on 14th Street in New York, had their own line of paints. So I guess he bought some purple paint. So the painting is called Torches Purple. But this, I'm not kidding. No one has seen this.
Wow.
I have 3 canvases, and I got a load of canvases. And that's it. Goodbye red, goodbye blue.
Wow.
Oh, I'll get back to color, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but this is, boy, I like them. And that's what happens when you're 86. I don't care, what business you're in, what you're doing. At 86, that's what I want to do, whether it sells or not. That's,
Yeah.
these were not done, because maybe they'll buy. I did them because I had to. I really mean it.
Oh, yeah?
I did one, and I said, wow. Well, actually, I started to do New Year cards. And
Oh, really?
I do a little sketch on inside. I have a card called, Good Year, and I send it to about 50 people. But it has one side is blank. I guess, so I started to do these black and white drawings of, Shana Tova, Shana Tova.
Yeah.
Well, I did 50 of them in no time. I mean, I just one after the other, and each one is different. If there was a musician involved, I worked up music into it, or artists, or it all happened within just because we're locked in.
Mm.
And yeah.
So let me ask you, Mordechai, how has this, I mean, you're showing us this picture of Tikkun Olam. How else has the lockdown, the quarantine, affected your creativity? I mean, this is clearly an interesting direction for your artistry. How else has it impacted? I mean, obviously you're not traveling around the country giving speeches to synagogues. So
No.
yeah. How has it impacted your art the last?
All of a sudden, it's the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, because I have all my time now, all my time. Like you had to set up a schedule. I mean, you wanted to speak to me.
Yeah.
Today, tomorrow, anytime. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
because I'm going to start one this afternoon.
Yeah.
After we're finished, yeah, it's because the canvases came, and sometimes you have to be in the mood also. Like yesterday, I couldn't do it,
Yeah.
but then now I'm ready to unwrap a big canvas. And like I say, to me, it's an opportunity, not a challenge.
That's a wonderful,
a blank paper.
that sounds like a really wonderful approach to it.
Oh yeah, that's give me a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And I can stand as long as I have to. Bend over, you don't hurt, you don't get hungry.
Yeah.
And then you take your break. I never notice it. Sometimes I'll sit there, and my wife knows. I'll sit there maybe for an hour looking at this thing. I'm working. I'm trying something. She knows already. And for us, when we got married, we used to sit there. In art school, when you learn to draw, you're holding your pencil up, and you're seeing where the top of the bottle hits the middle of the pumpkin. You look at those lines. So I used to sit there, we were sitting there maybe, and I'm going like this. I'm moving over. I'm lining things up to see where they fall. You start to draw, and you're drawing all the time. So she knows now. I'll be sitting there, and I'm moving my head, or I'm looking. She knows I'm seeing where does the bottom of that picture frame hit the lamp. That's how you learn to draw in size. You relate. That's why you start with a string. You always, when you start,
Really?
well, years ago, I don't know how it is now. We had a woman, drawing instructor. She must have been 90, dressed like a nun. She had a bun in the back of her head, gray bun, gray skirt down to her ankles.
Yeah.
And she was wonderful. What a wonderful teacher, drawing teacher. And now I think they start from models as soon as you get to art school. But back in the day, the last session of the first semester, she had a model, a young woman facing the wall. So, but we finally had our live model. That's another thing with artists, man. It's like a physician. Now I'm working on my drawing. I mean, you're trying to get a good drawing. It's, an artist understand it, It's, you just draw the body, which is, I remember a picture of Matisse in bed. He's a very old man already, still drawing a simple drawing. That's the vocabulary. That's the language. If you can still do a beautiful, like black and white drawing, if you can still draw the figure, the paintings, and that's all fine. But sometimes you just want to do a beautiful drawing, a pencil drawing or charcoal. Yeah. It's been an exciting life. Yeah.
Really great.
But that's funny. No one has seen those. I don't know what's going to happen with them, but eventually they'll be out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you want? How you doing, Shane? Were you outside all the time? Oh, she missed my whole interview, Rabbi. Sitting out in the sun. It's warming up here in Philly. Really beautiful.
Yeah, it's getting nice in Cincinnati for the moment too.
Yeah, beautiful. That's great. Could you lower that, Shane? Thanks.
You finished?
No. I have hours. The rabbi's got a lot of patience. A lot of patience. I showed him that, Shane. I say, sworn to secrecy. Because, where has this all led you? Where are you going now? I said, bam, there it is. Me and Franz Klein back together. It's wild.
All right. Cool. Okay, so
Did you want to know where I grew up?
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
I grew up in a ghetto in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It was called Strawberry Mansion in North Philly. There's not many people remember it anymore, but I used to go around when I went early 40 years ago and, maybe in Los Angeles say, well, I grew up in Strawberry Mansion. Someone said, my father grew up there, but not anymore. But it was named after a colonial mansion in the park, which we abutted on the river to the west. To the north were cemeteries, huge cemeteries. To the south were railroad tracks. And to the east was 29th Street, which was white on one side and black on the other. That was the separate. Wow. So that was the ghetto. It really was. Yiddish was spoken in the stores. So, I pretty much know a lot of Yiddish. I didn't use it, but I remembered it. It was my father's favorite language. It was Yiddish. He was from Russia. My mother was born here. So I grew up in Strawberry Mansion where, like Simchas Torah with the flags, with the candles in the balcony, the shamas would have to chase you. You're going to burn the place down. You go up in dark places when you had the candle. So then we moved out of there in like 48. My father saw a place being built further out in the suburbs and we moved out there. But, they used to call me Murph. In fact, my wife still calls me Murph. How did I get the name Murph?
Yeah.
I was the only kid on the block that went to Cheder. They were all Jewish kids. They all went to Simchas Torah, but they didn't go to Cheder. They were mostly American parents, but I follow some. So I would go to Cheder, which is right around the corner. So I remember one guy called me. He said, "There goes Murph," and that was my nickname forever. So even in Akiba, I was known as Murph. So, yeah, that's really funny. But yet the only guy going to Cheder give me an Irish name, making fun of me. But they were good. It was and it was during the Second World War with bonfires and scrap collections and air raid drills. Yeah. So then, anyway, I went to art school after graduation from Akiba, first graduating class.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Now it's called the Barrack Academy. The Barrack changed the name, but I graduated there and went to art school. And I always like to say, maybe people are afraid, send their child to a Hebrew day school. You're going to cripple them for life, make them weird. So I get to art school. I bought a pack of Camel cigarettes and a pair of dungarees. And I was an art student. I was an artist. So, my 5 years at Akiba had nothing to do with art school. Don't be afraid. The kid he's not going to fit into the world if he goes to a Hebrew day school, which seemed to be diminishing at the moment. Yeah.
Art schools?
No, Hebrew day schools.
Oh, Hebrew day schools.
Yeah. I always wanted to be an artist. I had two uncles who were picture framers. And my father told me we had a cousin in Russia who never came over that was an artist also. So it's in the family. We call it the curse. My two grandkids, they can draw like a whiz, and she's in Fashion Institute. Wonderful artist.
It must be fun to have those grandkids that are also artistically inclined, right?
Yeah, well, he's 10. He's kind of given up. He got a telephone and his own computer now. But through the years, when he used to come after school to our house till they could pick him up. And we used to draw competitions. I could never win, But he was an excellent. He had a lot of talent. Has a lot of talent. But when it'll happen or pop out, I have no idea. But my daughter, my granddaughter, she's artist forever.
Wow.
So she's enjoying in the Fashion Institute. Thank God she was in Italy for her second semester, and that's when the pandemic broke out. So they brought them back from Italy. They were right there in Florence.
Wow.
So let's say I was always in artwork. Went to art school, worked for my uncle's frame shop.
Yeah.
Came out, my first job in New York was textile designer, and up there at 40th and Broadway.
What types of textiles did you design?
Men's shorts. You ever see those men's shorts with the patterns and the pictures?
Oh, really? So that would have been the 1960s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even like 58, I got the job. 1958, 59, 60. Yeah. Sears was a big buyer for our department. They would, for the Christmas outfit for the family pajamas. It was a pajama division. And then eventually I got out of that. I wanted to get into, I went into women's robes. I worked for a wonderful woman, Maxine, in the palace. Yeah. She was a designer and also an artist. She was from Philly. She had gone to art school, and she was the stylist. I was the assistant. And that was several years. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with her. Then I used to go to the mill when they were printing the textiles.
Oh yeah.
To okay the designs and the reproduction of the designs. Then I went back to Uncle Tom's for foreman, because I was the nephew, and I worked at the frame shop till he passed away. All these things, what was the turning point? What was the pivot? I had no idea until Schleimer walked in. I mean, if his wife had come in for the pictures, I don't know what would be. It's that critical. So yeah. I left New York and opened a place. And I opened my own after my uncle passed away. It wasn't very successful. It was small, we could just kind of manage. And Maddie said, "That's it. I'm out of here. I'm getting a real job, you know, and we'll manage." I always say that too. If your wife says we'll manage, you'll manage. So she, don't worry about it. She started work down there. Through that, we met some wonderful people, and that's how it happened. It's
Wow.
so where was that turning point? I don't know the pivot. You know, the thing on which it all turned. What was
Yeah.
that critical point? I have no idea. That puts me right here now after 40 years of being on the road and being an artist, making what I want to make. I mean, you know, those guys never said, you know, make this or, you know, that's not good or something. I've been able to be an artist for 40 years from the first day. You know, I make the creation. I do take suggestions. That's no problem, but it's been a wonderful life. It's kind of amazing. You know, every waiter in New York is an actor. You know, you think you're in LA, sure.
Right.
But I was able to be an artist for 40 years.
That sounds like a blessing to have.
And yeah, the best thing that could happen to an artist, you're an
Yeah.
artist for 40 years. Managed to send the kids to school, pay the rent, you know, that's what it's all about. After, I can tell you, after 86 years, you got to pay the rent. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if the rabbi would like that, but you know, it's he said, no, you got to get out. Avodah Tabayre, right?
Right.
No, I have all
That's
these
important.
little
It's important to
things
take
that,
care of one's material things, you know, necessities.
my father told me, you know, in his village in Russia, the shamans would knock Avodah Sabore on the shutters, you know,
Yeah.
get the people, Avodah Tabore.
Yeah.
You know, these legends, these things that no one's interested in hearing or telling. But except my granddaughter loves the stories of New York, you know, when I was there.
Oh, wow.
In the 50s, we used to ride up. You know, we were still in art school, but you could drink at 18 in New York
Oh, wow.
back in the 50s. So we would like crash for a night up in New York. I had my best friend, Alan Porter. We drive up and go to the Cedar Bar and just hang out and try and breathe the air that these artists, that was the main, it's famous, you know, the Cedar Bar, it's gone now. But just to breathe the air, because I couldn't talk to a guy who's been painting for 30 years. What do I know? But Mr. Klein was there. So, hey, Mr. Klein, he liked students. He liked everybody liked him. He was a real mensch.
That's
Passed away
wonderful.
in 62. So I have a New York story, you know, like she lives at First Avenue and 12th Street. Now, Maddie and I, when we first got married, lived on 12th Street between 5th and 6th. So there's that 12th Street connection. Then she's on First Avenue. I said, well, you know, 2nd Avenue was the Yiddish theaters. I said, sure, 2nd Avenue. You know the song Secondhand Rose? They call him Barbra Streisand. They call me Secondhand Rose from 2nd Avenue. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. All about 2nd Avenue with the theaters. My bachelor party was at Moskowitz and Lupowitz, 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street, with strolling violins, kosher style. No, it probably was kosher, I suspect. I don't know. But that was the Jewish East Side, you know, with the theater district, 2nd Avenue. She's right there. I told her stories, you know, of New York as what it was. Now the Strand bookstore is still there on Broadway. You know, I mentioned that to her. But she loves to hear about what New York was, especially with these artists. She's in art school, and it comes up, you know, the abstract expressionists. Well, my grandfather was right there. He knew Franz Klein. She's doing a report on Franz Klein, actually.
Oh, that must be fun for you.
Oh, yeah. She's. I have yet to be interviewed, and I can send her information, you know, stories. First time I went to New York, I stayed at his apartment. I went to the Y. He said, get your bag. You'll stay at my place, which was a loft. They used to live in lofts, you know, the manufacturing lofts. I don't know if you ever saw them in New York, these smaller buildings that made into manufacturing. And they always had a heavy sliding fire door. You could, you know, if there was a fire, it would slide closed. You know, so most of these places were lofts where you weren't permitted to live. You could work, but you weren't permitted to live.
Yeah.
They built bathrooms, bedrooms. They fixed them up until they couldn't pay the rent, had to move out to another one. Honest to God. Yeah. Now in the 50s, he was coming down to Philadelphia one day a week for work. Maybe got $40 for the day. 50, I mean, back then in the early 50s. By the time he passed away in 1962, he owned a studio on 14th Street and he owned the building behind it.
Oh, wow.
That's how fast it happened. You just saw the last drip from the faucet. You know what I mean? That painting, boy, it all came in like to a point, and there it is.
Yeah.
Good or bad, I don't know, but boy, it feels so right.
That's
very strange. Well, it always felt right, but this as a conclusion feels so right. Stay well again, Rabbi.
Thank you too, Mordechai.
And,
Take care.
success.
All right, Zagazan.